Hi, everyone. Thanks to be here for this talk about zero-downtime deployments. I will try to be as informative and entertaining as possible, but I woke up like super early this morning. I woke up like super early I arrived very early on Saturday, so basically I'm completely wasted. If at some point you have a question and I don't answer right now, just give me time to gather my thoughts because it takes time to access the information. So I'm Nicolas Fränkel. For a long time I've been a consultant, like going to customers and trying to help them with development, architecture, whatever. And in last September, I changed. Now I'm a developer advocate, so I'm going to companies, I'm going to conferences, giving talks, writing blog posts. And since my company is basically more cloud-based, I'm shifting toward more DevOps stuff, even though I was always interested about how to build, how to deploy, how to monitor. I'm working for a company called Exascale. Who knows about Exascale?
I've heard the name.
Recently, a couple of, I wouldn't say months, but a couple of weeks ago, we opened our data center in Sofia. So you might be interested. I have some coupons if you want to try. So we offer cloud computing instances and cloud storage. You are already using Amazon or Google stuff, or yeah? You should be
for different projects, but mostly Amazon.
Yeah, you should be very afraid of that because you know about the Amazon, about the Cloud Act in the US. That's what I thought. So it's a US law, and of course, who is supposed to know about the US law, but it's a law that applies worldwide, like GDPR, which is a European law that applies worldwide. And it tells that if you contract with an American company, the US government can legally access the data of your data center wherever it's located.
Even the data centers in Europe?
Wherever the data center is located.
That's strange.
No, that's a problem. That's a
strange problem.
That's a big issue. So basically, if you have the data of your customers and somebody can access the data, then it makes you liable. So even if you are not using Exascale, even though we have a data center in Sofia, you should really be very, very wary about using Google, Amazon, Microsoft. And there are a lot of European providers, and you should definitely check. Just for that reason. Yeah. Okay, so why zero downtime? Actually, the first thing is who doesn't want to do zero downtime? It's super cool to do zero downtime. Everybody wants to have zero downtime. So if you are not offering zero downtime, like your engineers, they might not be super happy because they cannot work on the greatest and latest. It's not bleeding edge, and they might go to the competitors. Second reason to have zero downtime is people expect to have an application that is always, always, always available. Do you remember last time when you went to Facebook and you wanted to check your page and they said, hey, we come back in a few minutes, we are updating our application? Yeah, you remember? When was it?
Not more than a month ago.
Really?
Yeah.
They do really a very bad job. Because I don't have a Facebook account, but I've never seen that. But Gmail might be the same then. Gmail might be a better example.
Although they were having the same thing recently.
They might have issues, which is different.
It was an issue. It was an issue,
There is difference between having unexpected circumstances that makes the service unavailable and having to deploy constantly and making a static page. And we have done that for ages. Hey, we have a deployment, but because we have deployment 4 times in a year, we put a static page. We say to the guy, hey, sorry, can you come back in a few hours? And in a few hours, everything will be fine. And then we deploy. If you deploy multiple times a day, it's very hard to have a static page. And it defeats the purpose. So people, they expect your app or your site to be always on. And the last reason, if you are Amazon, if you are the Amazon web shop, you have no downtime at all. You cannot allow yourself to do that. You must constantly like deploy without having any downtime, because every time that you have a static page is a time where you don't sell. And if you are a sales guy, you want to sell always, always sell, always. Whatever the cost, you don't care. You just want to provide the stuff. And so it has a direct impact on the revenue. So for all those three reasons, you might want to do zero downtime. And of course, we already can do that, because you know about the blue-green deployment, right? Who knows about blue-green deployments? Who doesn't know about blue-green deployments? Ah, you are not shy, that's great. Because sometimes it's who knows, then I say half the room, and they, who doesn't know, and nobody says anything. So that's great. Okay, so blue-green deployment is a very simple, you don't see that much, but it should be green, and that should be blue. The above is green, and below is blue. So basically, you have two completely similar environments, and one of them is the green environment, let's say this one, and then you send the traffic to it, so you have a web server, an app server, a database, and this, meanwhile, is hardware is exactly the same, and then you update its software to be the next version, and when you decide, you say, hey, and it's done. It's magic. Everything works magically. So all your users, basically, they have the new version.
Isn't there a time when both of the servers are active, or this is different kind of deployment?
That's magic.
Okay.
That's magic. Of course, there is an issue first about the database. Because if you have data here, like, hey, I'm making an order, I'm putting stuff in my basket, then if you redirect the user to the new version, where is the data? Oh, no worries. We have the same database. It's magic. So as you mentioned, there are a couple of issues. The first is, actually here, it's easy to say, hey, I click, and then it's instant. That's what architects do, you know? They have a nice diagram, a schema, and everything happens magically. But in fact, it might take time for the router to be aware that something has changed, so you might still have like some users that are redirected to the old environment. So that's not super nice. And what do you do about the user who are still like using the environment when you make the switch? So because the card might not be, and probably is not in the database. The card is probably in a session, in memory. So what happens with them? And the third issue is about the data. Imagine the card is in memory, not in memory, but in the database, or you have something in the database. So there are two ways to cope with that. Either you need to migrate the data from one environment to the other, and it must be as instant as the arrow that goes from one environment to the other. Or you must handle the compatibility that you have one single database, and you must have the schema and the software that can work with both versions. That is not as easy as it seems. Colors are really bad, huh?
Yeah.
Or is it better here?
No.
Okay, I guess it's 256 colors. It looks much better on my screen. So with Kubernetes, everything it can be handled. Huh? You have like stuff that is called a rolling update. So you have version 1.0 of your application on multiple nodes, because of course you don't have one single server, you have multiple like nodes in a cluster, and then you can like roll them, and it works. More magic. And this is how it works. Basically, you know a bit about Kubernetes, I assume? Okay. So you have this resource called a deployment, and you say the strategy is rolling update, and you define two parameters, the max surge and the max unavailable. So the max surge is the number of extra pods that you allow yourself to have, and the max unavailable is the number of pods that you allow yourself to remove before.
So this is generally for the deployment or for the update, or? the max search and the max.
It's for the deployment. So basically, that's funny. Here it's a gray, but here there are 3 replica sets. So imagine there are 3 replicas. And so basically this is your base, and then you say, okay, I will allow 1 more, or I will allow 1 less, or I will allow X more. I show it. So you have 3 replicas by default. And you have a max unavailable 0, so you cannot go down, but you have max surge 1, so you can go up 1. So at the beginning, you have 3 replicas with 1.0. So when Kubernetes sees that, he says, okay, you want to deploy a new version, so I will do it in a rolling update way. So what it does is, it sees it cannot go down, but it can go above by 1, so it spins up a new pod with version 2.0. Okay? And then it says, okay, I cannot go up, but because I have base of 3, I can go down. So it removes 1 pod from 1.0. And then it does it again 1 more time until everything has been replaced. That's a rolling update with max unavailable 0 and max surge 1. If you change the parameters, so you have max unavailable 1 and max surge 0, then it's reversed. You have 3 pods, and you cannot go up because, let's say, your hardware is not super great, so you don't want to consume more hardware, and you still want to have like the number of nodes and not have as many pods to keep the same number of pods in the nodes. So you remove 1, and then you add 1 more, then you remove 1, then you add 1 more until everything is done. Those are fixed numbers, but you can have percentages, and of course you can like mix and match. You can have both. And in that case, you can go 1 above and 1 below, so it's much quicker to update everything. So there is an issue with that, is that it takes time here to spin this new pod. Not only like technically, but the pod is not ready yet. When you start a new pod, it takes time for the application to start. If you have used Java before, you know that the JVM takes a bit of time. A bit of time. Depending on your, so basically, Kubernetes knows about that because you can, by default it doesn't know, but you can tell Kubernetes, hey, this pod will be ready, and you tell it, just make a HTTP request to this endpoint. And when the endpoint returns you, hey, I'm good, then you can send a request to it, you can mark the pod as ready, and you can continue your rolling update. Until that point, it will just spin this new pod and continue with the rest. So who here is a Spring Boot user? Who here is not a Spring Boot user? Okay. Who here is not a Spring Boot user, but a developer? Okay. What's your technology? Żal. So Spring Boot is on top of Spring and it offers something called the actuator, which basically is our monitoring endpoints. So you have a health endpoint that gives you the state of the application, whether it's done or not. You have a logs endpoint, then you can access the log. You have metrics endpoints, so you have a lot of metrics depending. So you have a response time of every other endpoint, this kind of stuff. So if you are a Spring Boot user, you don't know about the actuator, you should check, it's really great. If you are Node.js, you can take advantage of that and create the same in Node.js. And people will love you for it. Again, it's gray here, but basically it's a deployment. And I tell in the deployment that there is something called the readiness probe. And to check whether a pod is ready, it should make a GET request to this path, which is the default path for the else endpoints in Spring Boot, but you can change it to the default port. Problem solve. In general, that ends here. Kubernetes solves all your issues. Just use Kubernetes and you are done. But I told you about the database before. What about the database? It still is an issue, right? So if you do the rolling update with a database, this is what happens. So here you have your schema 1.0. Here you have application 1.0. Everything is fine. And then you try to do a rolling update. So it should be 2.0, but your other pods, they just cannot work with that. Doesn't work. So actually what you must do is you must design your application so that consecutive version of the application must be compatible with both schemas, with the old schema and the new schema. And it works in both directions, because imagine, now it works, or not? Yes. So you do the rolling update, everything is fine, you upgrade the schema, and your application knows, like your .20 knows how to work with 1.0 and 2.0 here. Everything is fine, you are happy, and then you need to roll back. No, like that. You need to roll back like that. But your 1.0 doesn't know how to work with the schema 2.0. You cannot roll back anymore. Of course, you never need to roll back because you never make bugs. No bugs in production, never happens. So this is very, very unlikely. But still, just in case, it doesn't work. So you might want to check about that. So not only you must make the changes like forward compatible, but you may make the changes backward compatible. And some changes that are not compatible, like what if I change the name of a column? What if I have a single column and I make two columns because I stupidly designed my application? What if I have like a table and I make two tables with a foreign key relationship, one-to-one relationship? This is obviously not backward compatible. So in order to cope with that, you can break this change into a series of backward and forward compatible changes so that every change is compatible side by side. So not with like two steps, but one step before. So side by side, they are compatible with each other. That never happens. I have a database, I design my table in such a way that now I say, that was a design mistake because your application, you need to evolve the model and the business case wants you to do something very smart. So you have one table and you want to create two tables out of it with a relationship. So I will be very, very simple. I will have a one-to-one relationship. This is my initial table. Remembers database 101? It's not super nicely designed because here I have a person and an address. So after some time, I want to say, no, I want actually to have like that. But the problem is I already have data. So I must actually do what I told you. I must design my application so that I can do this update. So let's think about it. The first step is to create the address table, and then the application will use still the person table, okay? But every time we do like we update or we create data into the person table, we copy the data or we update the data into the address table. Yep. Second step, so if we roll back afterwards, address table, it was never used, nothing happens. Everything is fine. Second step, we do exactly the same, but now the app, instead of using the person table, uses the address table. and the synchronization is done in the other direction, from the address table to the person table. Again, if we roll back at this point, and I'm breaking the clicker, if we roll back at this point, because we copied everything from the address to the person, everything is fine. We still have our person table, which is not updated. Everything is compatible. Third step, well, we stop copying the data, everything is fine. And fourth step is anytime you want, you might remove and do some cleanup, you remove the extra columns on person. Works for you? Seems sound? Yeah, I don't seem super convinced. Is there no, you can tell me, perhaps I forgot something. Might be.
I'm wondering only about the copying. Is it happening on entity creation or it's some cron job?
So it must be synchronous. It must be synchronous. Whether you do it on the code side, on the app side, or on the database side depends entirely on you. It could be a trigger on the database, or it could be your own code. And because I'm not a database genius, I prefer to do it in code. But if you are a very Oracle-centric organization, if you know a lot about triggers, how they work, and everything is fine, and you make everything transactional, that's perfectly fine. So let's consider we are using Spring Boot. You know that Spring Boot integrates by default with Hibernate, and it will auto-magically create the schema for you. It will update the schema for you. So you don't want that, because if it updates the schema for you, the app 2.0, the first pod that is launched, will update the schema of the database to 2.0. It will make the 1.0 app incompatible. You don't want that, so you cannot do that. You must first disable this mechanism, and you delegate to a tool called Flyway or Liquibase. Are you using here Flyway or Liquibase? Liquibase? And Flyway, both. Well, you must choose one, obviously. So I'm using Flyway just for no reason. Well, actually, there is a reason. I know the guy who develops it. You know Axel Fontaine? Yeah? He's super funny. He has pictures of him with a parrot on his shoulder. Really? I'm not kidding. You will check afterwards. So if you are not using any database versioning tool, I encourage you to look at it, either Liquibase or Flyway or anything, but I mean both are basically the leaders there, because nothing is worse than you have the state of your database and you don't know how you got there. How do you roll back the latest changes? So even if you are not doing rolling updates, if you are not using Kubernetes, you really, really want to do that. So Flyway, in a couple of words, it's based on stuff called migration, and a migration is just a simple SQL script, and you run your migration in order. So you have a script called v1 blah blah, v2 blah blah. Flyway will see the scripts. It will execute them in order. When a script has been executed, it is recorded in the database. So if you already have passed from 1 to 5, you still have the scripts 1 to 5 and you add a 6th script, Flyway will see that the first 5th has been already executed and it won't execute them again. It will just execute the 6th. Something that don't try to be too smart, like, hey, it has executed this script, but I can change it perhaps. It also records the hash. So it will hash the script and record the hash. And if the hashes, they don't match, it will say, oh, something is bad, I don't work anymore, which is not what you want. With Spring Boot, you put your migrations in db/migrations. If you are using Maven, like SSC main resources, db migration, and automatically those scripts will be applied at startup. So if you are in a clustered environment with multiple nodes, just like in Kubernetes, what will happen is basically the first node that gets pinned up with the new version will see this file. It will try to apply the migration. Meanwhile, it will put a lock on the database, and until it's finished, it's not ready. So it will anyway do its stuff without being disturbed by other pods or other nodes. Once it's done, it will release the lock. Then Kubernetes will say, hey, are you ready with the readiness probe? Pod will say, yes, I'm ready. And then it will continue the migration. And then the other pod will spin on, will check that the migration have already been applied, and start normally. I told you I wanted to do the stuff in the code, like the synchronization. I try to be smart by using GPA listeners, because I try to play the game of the standards, which of course, if you have been a Java E developer, and you might know about the Java E namespace right now, which is super fun, it doesn't work. I cannot inject GPA listeners, so I had to go bypass the abstraction and go down to the Hibernate level. So I created Hibernate listeners, which work super well. And I've talked too much. Now it's time for a demo. Unless it's very clear. No, you want me to prove that it works, right? Show me the code. Huh? Yeah, sure. Okay. So this is my super duper application. So I will run it, and you will see how good I am at design. Why is that funny? Every time I tell that, someone laughs. Why? I've not seen it yet. You have no clue. Perhaps I'm very good. I'm just super shy. Or perhaps not.
Developer design everything in tables.
You know, it's very lightweight, no JavaScript. Very performant. Okay, nothing fancy. I can add a new person. I have no update, no delete. It's just to have one stuff is just to insert. The rest, it's the same. Okay, how do I do that? I have a model. It's Kotlin. Are you good with Kotlin?
No.
It's like Lombok, but better.
Like Lombok?
Lombok. Okay. Because everybody who does Java now uses Lombok, which I used 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, but now I have Kotlin, so I don't use Lombok anymore. I use Kotlin to have the same result, but at least it's really baked into the language. Who doesn't understand this? So this is a GPA entity, okay, called person. So table by default will be person. It has an ID of type long, which basically is generated by the database. I'm using H2, so basically it will be auto-incremented. The rest are just strings. And this is the GPA entity. Okay with that?
Yes.
Good. No, I'm looking at the Node.js guy. Sorry for that. I don't know your name, so. And here, I have the application, Spring Boot application. I have the controller, so basically when I make a GET request on /, I will create a new person, find every person in the repository, and returned /person to go to, here, person.html in time time-left, I don't know how you pronounce it. Okay, so nothing fancy. And to post, I do exactly the same. So I get the person that I created in the model, and I just save it to the database. I'm using GPA repository because I'm super lazy, and GPA Spring Data GPA lets me just implement it at runtime with no issues, easy peasy, lazy. Okay? First thing, I have my initial script. So my initial script is actually I create table person and I just insert something. So I shouldn't do it into this script, but I do it into this script, create the table, I insert the person. Yep? Great. Second step. How, from a Spring Boot application, would I create a Docker image? I create a Docker file. Or not. Because remember, I'm lazy. Sorry?
With points or not?
Actually, I have something called Jibe. Jibe is made by Google, and basically, it's able to create a Docker image out of your Maven application. Perhaps even Gradle. Perhaps. I don't care. I don't like Gradle anyway. But at least Maven. And sometimes it's able to know about the main class of your application. So here I don't need to do it. By default, it will also create the image by taking the name of the artifact and telling latest, but I want to have a specific version, the version that is tied to the pom.xml. I execute it in the package phase, which is stupid, I think, because I don't need it. I can do it on the compile phase, and there are two goals. So one is Docker build. For this one, it just uses the local Docker daemon. So it sends the image to the local Docker daemon, and it appears in my images. And I don't remember, the other is either build or Docker. It sends it to a repository, and then you can configure the repository so you can push at every build.
Like ECR repository?
Like?
ECR repository?
ECR?
Repository.
I don't know this term. Docker repository.
Yeah.
So either it's Docker Hub, it's a public Docker repository like Docker Hub by default, or you can configure your own private repository, which I encourage you to do because you don't want to send your private images to public repositories. So that's bad stuff. It happens to a Russian company 6 months ago or 1 year ago.
They offer private repositories.
Sorry?
They offer private repositories.
Yeah, it's not because they offer it that this Russian company used them. So probably someone decided, hey, it's very easy, let's push. And then, I don't know why, but we have been hacked. Привет, Martinchik. So that's the second phase. And at this point, we can stop that. And we can just have our application running on Kubernetes. So if I do Docker images here, and I will do grep Zero-downtime, because I have a lot of images, you can see that I have already some images with specific versions. Okay, so I won't build every time because it can be super boring, it takes a bit of time. So you might ask, why 49 years ago? Because I was even at that time I was very good, I use Kubernetes every day. No, by default, the Jibe plugin uses no timestamp. So if you want to have timestamps, you need to let it know about it. Otherwise, it will be very bad. And so now what I can do is I will have my Kubernetes deployments. Okay. I have actually two Kubernetes deployments. One is a database that I don't want to touch. So the first thing, who is not super familiar with Kubernetes YAML files? Okay, so first step, sorry, it's fine. First, you define a namespace, because just like you define packages in your code, you want every stuff that belongs together to be separated. You want to define namespace. So I define a namespace called Zero-downtime, and then I can access it, and I can put some access control restrictions on it. The second is, you might know that if you deploy something on Kubernetes, you cannot by default access it outside of the cluster. For that, you need a service. And there are several kind of services, but since I'm using my own local machine, I will be using node port. And basically, it makes a port translation from this port to this port, and to this port to this port. And in that way, I can access the port from outside, from my own machine. Okay, and then the last, but surely not the least, what did I do here? Is the deployment itself. So here I'm using deployment, but it's super stupid because I will have only a single replica, and basically I won't use any of it. I will just deploy it for once. So now I must check if I already have something. Kubernetes get pods. No, kubectl, sorry. Or kubectl or whatever. And there is a database running. So what I will do, I will remove it, and it will get redeployed automatically. So kubectl delete deployment database. Poof, easy peasy. And now I will redeploy it again. So apply -f and then .yaml. Okay?
Why are we doing that?
Sorry?
Why are we doing that?
Because the database was from my last demo, so I already had all the migration that were created. The schema was already so I want to start from scratch. Make sense? Good. So normally, if I go on, I must know the IP of the cluster now. So since it changes every time I stop it, minikube IP. Today it's this address. And normally, or not. I didn't expose it to the outside, and I wonder why. No, I know why. This is this port. Yes. And now if I check the, sorry, here it is. If I check the schema, this is the H2 console, if you are familiar with it. There is nothing. It's just like the default new schema. Okay? So now what I want to do is I want to deploy my application on Kubernetes. So I will get here, I will check that I'm in version 1.0. Okay? And I will now apply. So normally what should happen at this time is it should see that it needs 3 replicas. So it will spin on 1. And the first one should handle the schema creation, and the other 2 should be waiting until everything is fine, right? So let's see how it works. kubectl get application, or pods would be better. Watch. So one is running right now, and the other are on hold because they have nothing to do. Sorry. Yes, it was super quick. Now all 3 are running together. They are super happy. And now my schema normally has been created. Okay? So because the first migration has been created. Normally, there should be one single line of data into this database, right? There is one single. I didn't lie. So far, I didn't lie. Okay? So now, I will use the application. So again, I must use that address. I will be there. No, then it's 2. Yes, it's 2. And I will create an entity with this version of the schema. Okay? Just to be sure that it works. And because now I will create gen_do. Yep. Here I'm using the host name, which is the pod name. And here I'm using the version. So basically, I'm getting this version from the POM and this from the inet. So just so that you know how I get this stuff, I've created something called context. So I inject from the application.yaml or application.property the info.app.version that gets sourced by the POM. And here, I just get the inet address.getLocalhost.hostname. Okay? And here, the application.yaml. Here, info.app.version, and I get the version from the POM. I encourage you to have this information always when it's deployed. Perhaps you don't want to make it accessible to everyone. Perhaps it should be like white characters on white background or black characters on black background, but you must access this information every time you need it. Okay, everything is fine now. Next. The next is we create the address entity. So it looks a lot like the person entity. Because actually we want to have the same structure, but the person itself. Now a bit further is we also want to create the physical structure in the database table. So we must add this script. And the next step is to sync. So every time I make changes, in that case, I insert something into the person table, I need to create the same information into the address table. As I told you, I'm using Hibernate, and Hibernate has a rich event model around it. So basically, you can subscribe to events and do stuff. And basically, what I'm doing here is that every time I insert something, I will check if the entity is a person. If it's a person, then I create a new instance of address from it, and I save it as well. And don't ask me about transaction. I have no fucking clue. It's up to you afterwards to check about transaction, because I've already had this question, so disclaimer, I didn't check. This is not the point. And I'm using those extension attributes. One reason why I'm using Kotlin is because I can create easily an address out of a person. So I don't touch the person itself. The entity is not touched. But then I create an attribute called address. And when I get the address, it creates a new instance of this address with everything that is copied from the person. Who loves Kotlin already? I do, really. It's super cool. Super cool.
It looks a bit
It looks a bit ugly.
yeah, a bit.
You don't want to be my friend, right? No, oh, yeah. It starts very badly. You might not be used to it, that's for sure. But I believe that if you are a Java developer, it's very understandable. You just say, okay, entity.address, you click here, and then you see, okay, person.address. This, for me, a lot of people say that Kotlin's main advantage is about null handling. There are nullable types and non-nullable types, and if something is nullable, you might do a lot of stuff to make the compiler happy because it will bitch a lot. But I think extensions are very, very powerful. You can do a lot of stuff. Like you keep your class clean, and classes that might be beyond your control, like, I don't know, classes from the GDK that you might want to like improve, and you add them through, you add your behavior or your state through extensions. It's extremely powerful. I love it. So normally, every time I will create a person, it will like mimic the data into the address table. So what I will do now, I will check that this application.yaml is in 2.1, so it's not. And I will deploy this version. So it applies a version, and then we can check the deployment here, and it should be zero downtime. So you can see that it killed the pod I was on, and then it got me to another pod because the one that is deployed is not ready yet. We might also want to check the database state. We can see it has already been created, but perhaps it doesn't tell it's ready. Here, this one is terminating. This is not the one I'm on so far. It doesn't like me. Yes. Zero downtime. Okay? So let's check that what I told you is true. So let's create an entity now. And let's see how it works from here. So person, everything is good. And then we can check the address. The address is here. So now, if I roll back, everything will be in person, nothing will be touched, nothing will be changed, everything will be fine. Okay? Next step.
What if you want to go rolling back further?
You don't. Remember, I told you that what you can do is you separate a breaking change into a series of compatible change side by side. But you only have two sides.
I get that.
You only have two sides.
But I want to migrate from one functionality to another. I break it to 5 small versions. And now I want to go back to...
No, you don't want that.
Why?
No, the question is, why would you?
Because there is an issue.
No, because you had 5 steps. You already had one step to make sure that you didn't do any mistake.
Supposed to verify every step.
Okay, but...
No, there is no okay, but no, let me be very, very clear on that. You make 5 steps. Every step, you must make sure everything works.
That's a nice promise.
No, it's not a promise, I pay you for that. That's your promise.
Yeah, okay, but
there
is someone at the end who is promising this, and he's not correct. He didn't check it.
So what happened?
Go back to the version that is stable. That was
but you cannot do that. You cannot do that. What do you do when you have not this process in place? You deploy your application. You have changed your database schema already.
Yeah.
You have not this process in place, and there is a bug. What do?
I revert back.
No, you cannot. Your schema has been changed already.
The database also.
Sorry?
I will revert the database also.
No, the state has already been migrated.
You make a new version where...
No, that's a problem. You are trying.
I know.
You are trying.
Happy if this was also
No. You are trying to say, hey, this makes everything possible. No, it's just that it's a way that makes zero downtime possible. The promise here is just zero downtime. It doesn't make your testers better. It doesn't make the risk lesser.
Yeah, that's my issue, that it doesn't make the
But it's not, that the talk is not about zero bugs.
yeah.
The progress is about zero downtime here. You attended the wrong talk.
Yeah, but
You have a lot of bots in your sentences.
if your zero downtime brings you to a bug.
No,
you
again,
go back.
no, listen. You know, somebody told that everything that is before the bot doesn't exist. So you say yes, bot, so yes doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So you are saying no. So just listen. I'm telling you, you can have this state and you can have this state. You can have one mistake, you can roll back one step. And you are telling me, well, but if I make many mistakes, if you make many mistakes, you have no place in my team. Really, I'm not joking. Everybody makes mistakes, but one mistake. So at every step, you must check that it works.
Okay.
Hey, you don't like it, huh?
No.
No, I see that, huh?
I'm sure someone will make multiple mistakes. Or will make a mistake in the beginning, which...
But again, what happens if you have the traditional stuff? Traditional is you put your static web page saying, hey, we are doing our stuff. You do the database change, the schema change. You migrate all data. You put the site back online, and then something bad happens.
So the way I would do it is make a backup, then do the update, and then if I have to go back, I can go back.
How long does the backup work takes? How long? No. How long does the restore works? Because the only way you know you can be really, really sure you have no bugs is when you start having traffic. You do a lot of tests every time, and again, you can make one mistake, yes. But at some point, only when there is like real traffic, you know, because there might be like concurrency issue that your test didn't find. This is not called how to have zero bug in concurrency in parallel environments.
Yeah.
So it doesn't solve this issue, but you have exactly the same issue in the normal way you work.
And basically you handle it the normal way.
Exactly. You make backup, you make restores, but here at least, because the database schema change is one step compatible, you have like one free mistake. You can roll back without having to do restore, backup, or whatever.
Yeah, but isn't this principle also applicable for the old way of deploying?
Sure, it is.
Okay.
But I will tell you about something afterwards.
Okay.
It's about the migration. It's about the migration. Okay? So now I applied 2.1, and it's already done. I showed you 2.1. Now I want to do the 2.2. And I want to apply 2.2. Okay, same stuff. This one is not the one it's killing. I don't know, it's never the first one, the one I'm using that is killed. I don't know how Kubernetes handles it, chooses the node, but I've done this demo multiple times and I cannot understand how it chooses the stuff. Anyway, now you see that it has been migrated. So the second, yes, sorry?
I think in this case you're not doing routing because every time you refresh your page, you should hit another port on the same one.
I have no clue. It's about, sorry?
Even if you're running, you should hit also ports on the other version.
But here I was it was another pod just previously. It was a 2.1, but another pod. There was a bit of lag. Now it's the new one with the new version. I don't know. I must really check. To be honest, I just don't understand why. Okay, this version of the application also. No, it was 2.2. Sorry, I missed something very important in 2.2. So 2.2 does the migration itself. So I altering the tables, and I migrate the data. And here is what I want to say is, so first, I told you I'm not a SQL guy. This is very, very complicated. This is like proprietary H2 SQL. It handles the case where basically the stuff already exists. It shouldn't normally, but I still handle it just in case. And here the issue might be about the migration. It might take a long time. And that's one of the issues, is basically if you have your traditional stuff, this migration might take a long time. Even here it might take a long time depending on the size of your data. So you must think about it, how will you handle it. Again, it's better than hello world here. I'm handling real stuff, but it's not real world case issue, a real use case. So I'm just telling you this might be a pain point. And at 2.2, I say, okay, let's create a new entity. Still works. So here, as I told you, everything is already in the address because the stuff has been migrated. And if I run here, you can see this new entity has been added. And in person, normally, everything has been added. How does it work? But it's just the opposite way. Now in the model, in the synchronization, is I check if I use a new address, and if it's an address, then I update the person. So now let's try to do the rollback to check that it works. So I will get back to my application.yaml, and I can apply it. So normally I'm rolling back. So here, at some point, it should be 2.1. So it's still 2.2. You saw that the pod was killed, so it's a new instance, but it's still a new one. Again, I don't understand. It's always the last one. Yes. And I can create a new entity here. It will still be compatible. So, zero downtime. Okay. I will just finish the presentation. So, conclusion. Everybody wants zero downtime. It is possible. It is actually possible. This is how you can do it. But it's not free. It's not, hey, just use Kubernetes and everything will be fine. And there will be unicorns and rainbow, and you can just have your lunch with 2 hours and stuff, just like in France. You must handle it from the start. You must design your changes to have this change that can be broken down. It requires a lot of effort and not just last-ditch effort. It must be, when you start the development of the feature, you must break down the changes. And if you start having branches, it's going to be a mess. So it's possible, but it's expensive. So before thinking, hey, let's do zero downtime because everybody does it, yes, there are benefits, but there are also costs, and you might want to apply your old ROE engineering principle. What are the benefits? And what is the cost? Okay? Thank you for your attention. This picture looks very shitty in 256 colors. This is my blog, in which I publish like weekly blog posts. This is my Twitter. You can follow me. I will be happy to. And more importantly, this is a source repository where you can find the source code so you can play with it, make pull requests, do stupid stuff with it, crash everything. It's up to you. Any questions? No question?
No, I have one.
Yes.
Why do you choose the Flyway, except that the founder is your friend?
Because I know Axel.
You know Excel?
Axel Fontaine is the guy behind Flyway.
Only this is the reason?
Yes. I didn't know, I knew none of them. I never used any of them.
But because in the Flyway, if you want to do a rollback, undo of a migration, it's in the paid version. It's not free.
Okay, let's talk about undoing Flyway. So it is possible. You can provide a script. So normally migration, I've shown it already. Migrations, they are numbered v1, v2.1, v whatever. You can, anytime you provide a v something, you can provide a u something, which is basically the undo. You must create it yourself. It doesn't know magically how to revert a change. And there is no integration with Spring Boot. No integration with Spring Boot. So you must do everything manual.
And also, did you use it in real life projects? I mean,
No. No, I'm a consultant, but I'm not the bullshitting kind, so no, I don't know. No, I didn't.
If we go back to the question with the few steps revert, if we revert each step by...
No, one mistake. After that, you are fired. I told to your colleague, you didn't follow.
Okay, he's fired, but what about the situation after he's fired?
You know, it's like a sacrifice to the customer. You say, I cut his head, my employee's head, look at him. And then behind that, you have a whole team of engineers who are, but it's exactly the same as before. You should prepare for having multiple failures, but at least here you have one possibility to roll back. But that's funny that you have this kind of question. What happens if, I mean, your whole life is made of that, is what happens if. I don't understand why in this case it should provide you the more security than other ways. And it already provides you one more, as I mentioned.
Maybe because you actually have to pay the price of a lot of more effort to do it, like many steps, thinking carefully what to do in every step, etc., so you kind of expect to be...
No, because it's your engineering point of view. The benefits I get is my app is always up. That's not an engineering benefit. It's benefit for the customer. It's benefit for Amazon, who can sell 24 hours, 7 days a week. You get no benefit. You also have a more issue because you have to have constant monitoring. But it's a clear advantage.
Probably if it's that important for you to be able to roll back several versions, you can put even more additional effort to keep the backwards compatibility of your versions. And then you will be able to roll back. It will be even more complicated. But
yes, that's the point. I mean, at some point you have to say, okay.
to remove the columns from the original table, you can keep them for 3 versions.
But I hope you test your applications. I hope. Why are you laughing? It makes me very uncomfortable.
Because there are always customers that can test them.
What do you mean?
In the end, no matter how much you test, the customer is the one actually testing the application.
Okay, but then you migrate from v2.1 to v2.2 and you let him test until he's happy and he gives you a stamp. If you want to be process driven, then okay, are you happy with his step? Yes. Okay, so we can, our deployment, which was supposed to last 1 day, will last 2 weeks. Are you okay with that? Because when you are doing this running update, you might be like developing other features, but you won't be deploying those other features. So it defeats the purpose. But again, the balance between the risks and the speed of the development and the deployment. There is, again, something from my consulting life, it depends. If you want to be secure about everything, then you take 1 year to test everything. Then you use Istio and you send, you mirror the traffic from production to your staging environment, and then you make sure that everything is fine. It's exactly the same. You can do it with Istio. It's no magic, eh?
Sadly, it isn't.
Sorry?
Sadly, it isn't.
Yeah, but if it was magic, you wouldn't be paid so much, right? Other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
When you were discussing the problems with the blue-green strategy with common database, you mentioned another valid point that what if not everything is in the database? What is the
sessions? So yeah, that's something I don't handle it. So you might want to replicate the sessions. I mean, there are many ways to do it. But actually, it's not a problem I choose to handle because, I mean, session replication, we know how to do it. There are already products that you can use Spring Sessions and you have like a Redis database and it can be done. It's not a new problem. It's not a new problem. This is
just that you have to take care of it.
Of course, of course, of course. I think that there is Alex Soto in Red Hat who has exactly a talk named Zero-downtime, and he uses OpenShift, so the Red Hat Kubernetes, and I think it doesn't handle the database, but he handles the session. So you might want to complement it with that.
Combine.
Yeah.
Or ideally keep everything stateless.
That would be the best. My application was stateless, as you saw. Huh?
Yeah, no problem here.
Yep.
Do you think that the teams that are, or the projects that are taking this approach and are targeting zero downtime, and that it actually forces them to make releases with smaller changes inside? They're not, because obviously the complexity raises when you are targeting something like this. Do you think that this is actually forcing teams to make more open release or smaller release in order to be able to handle something like that?
I think it's the opposite way. The problem that we have right now, I will show you the last slide because at least you will be able to take pictures if you want to get the links. Right now, we are using, I mean, in traditional companies, we are deploying 4 times a year. That's my experience. Traditional companies, they are old companies, they deploy 4 times a year. This makes the step very high. So the tests, it's like weeks of testing. And of course, it's easier to miss a bug because the scope is so huge, because you have a lot of unintended side effects. And the promise of continuous delivery, even if it's not really continuous, if you break down this huge step into multiple small steps, then you not only you deliver value faster, but actually it makes the process smoother. So basically, when people they have only 4 deployments a year, they don't want to do it because they know it will be a mess. They know they will have to work overtime. They know it will be very stressful. They know all of that. So the reflex is we should do it less often, which is not a good idea. Counterintuitively, you should deliver more often, then you deliver faster, and it's easier to test, and you take less risk every time. So if you have this kind of stuff, I mean, it's very small changes, and then you can.
Teams need to actually make more often releases and with smaller scopes in order to be able to handle something like this, right?
I mean, you go this way when you are already trying to do continuous deployment. When you already have the maturity of having small steps, then you can do that. If you do that with like the business value of 4 months, you are dead. Because again, this is one change, one small change, but if you have multiple branches that are merged together, how will you handle the compatibility? It will be.
Because I'm trying to map this basically to the last sprint that I had.
Sure, sure.
The changes in the database. And for example, how much overhead we're going to have if we need to add additional SQL scripts and prepare for those things. And I'm just thinking that the scope that we can actually now produce will be definitely less.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, this is one of the things that you need to live with because you're getting.
But again, that should lead you to like faster delivery.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah. Good question. Okay, then thank you very much.